Good morning. This is Jo Dumbia. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Food Literacy Group. We are set for an amazing program. It is 10 o'clock, and so far we have 28 people in my book that calls Quorum. So I'm going to give an opening to the session. I'm incredibly glad that you all are here. This is amazing. You know, we have an incredibly inspirational program for you today. As you can see, we have a cadre of panelists that are going to share with us many of the different angles and facets of food, our theme of concern, under this roof. And after the wisdom that they can impart on us, you are going to have the benefit to go in separate groups to discuss the different items and elements. Before we start, let me tell you one thing that we have imposed to the panelists an incredibly great challenge. These are people with an amazing experience and knowledge in the subject, passionate about it. We have a series of key important questions for them to address, but we have asked them to do that in 2 minutes on each question. So we are asking them to synthesize the best wisdom to address the question in a very minimum amount of time. Why did we do that? Come on, we have all of these people, all of this expertise, and yet we are not benefiting a lot from them. One of the things that we're trying to do, it is sort of to tease the flavor of the very many different angles that the food dimension has, to give us collectively the tools to see the all aspects and areas that we may not have considered, areas of interest, so that we can have an enriching conversation. This is the beginning or a continuation, rather, of a conversation that we have been having continuously to see how do we collectively increase and elevate the conversation and our contributions to society to address the food dimensions. With all of that, I want to introduce our panelists. We have Amanda Tyndall from Lawn to Table. She is the co-chair of the Urban Agriculture Work Group. We have Jillian Kamura from Capital Area Food Bank. She is the Food Access and Literature Work co-chair. We have Kate Urban from Food Rescue US in DC. We have Sean Soko, the Fairfax County Public School Food and Nutrition Services Director. We have Julie Williamson from Compost Crew, incredibly important subject. Austin Gastrell, which is the from the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. So as you can see, we are incredibly well-rounded and we have a powerhouse for us today. I would like to begin by asking each one of the panelists who you are and what does your organization do. And so let's keep our ears open because this is, pure, delicious knowledge empower people. So I wonder whether you'd like me to call you so we go in an order manner, or you use free will and, raise your hand and tell us in 2 minutes who you are and what your organization represents. Go for it, people. This is free flowing. So, yes, yes, Kate, go.
My name is Kate Urbank. I hear a little echo. Hopefully that'll go away. I am the site director for Food Rescue USDC. We are a national nonprofit. I happen to run the DC site, which actually should be called DMV because we serve Northern Virginia, parts of Montgomery County, and parts of PG County, but focused on DC. actually focused on DC and Northern Virginia, I must say. We have an app. It's our own technology. It's what we use to be able to do the work we do, which is to engage volunteers who consult the app. It's kind of an opt-in thing. We don't have a lot of push notifications, and they literally go shopping for a food rescue between a business donor and an area nonprofit, mutual aid, an organization that addresses food insecurity by knowing its clients and guests. So we do have a dual mission. I like to say actually 3 missions. It's both food insecurity that we combat and also addressing food waste, which we all know is terrible for the environment. But beyond that, we do build community, which I think is really important, because unless you have that excitement around this joint effort, you might lose people. So it's a beautiful way for people to connect and understand how critical it is to do the work that we do. So that's probably under 2 minutes, but in a nutshell, we are been around since 2016. I did bring this program to DC because I was a volunteer for it up in Fairfield County, Connecticut, where it was founded. And to date, we've rescued coming on 13 million pounds of food, whether it's a bag of bagels or a truckload of apples. So we meet the moment by finding volunteers and agency personnel who have their own vehicles to, pick up food rescues all around the DMV.
Thank you, Kate.
Sure.
Who wants to go next?
I can go next, Joe. Thank you.
Great, Amanda. Thank you.
Yeah. My name is Amanda. As Joe mentioned, I am the founder of Lawn to Table, which provides vegetable gardening as a service at private residences. I also sit on the co-chair of the Urban Ag Working Group, but also unofficially in this conversation, I'm sharing from my experience now. I'm currently the general manager of Compass Rose, which is a restaurant in DC. I've previously served at Maidan in DC as well, and at Field and Main restaurant in Marshall, Virginia. So I've seen the ways in which some organizations do a really great job at food waste reduction. And I've also seen firsthand the many struggles that come to restaurants in the food waste reduction space, and how we're using our ingredients best. So a little bit of both, a little bit of on the back end in terms of food waste reduction, how we're reusing it, a little bit on the front end in terms of making sure that we're not using too much to begin with.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Great, Julie.
And I may share my screen just because mine has a little show and tell. But I'm with Capital Area Food Bank. Our main mission is really to help feed people who are in need of food and provide those food access points. But along with that, we rely heavily on donations. We look at food rescue as being a key component of both taking care of our neighbors and the planet simultaneously. And we have several ways that we do that, either through education or through the actual provision of food. I just sent a request to share my screen. Okay, give me 1 minute. And so one of our primary rescue programs is the Partner Direct Retail Program that's coordinated with Feeding America and with our pantry organizations. We have around 400 pantry partners across the DMV. And we help to pair them with retailers who are willing to donate food that would otherwise go to waste. So last year, we redirected 15.8 million pounds of food to neighbors in need. So it's really a huge amount of food that is being rescued that would otherwise go unused. Other ways we look at food waste reduction is through our nutrition education tools that we develop for both pantries and our neighbors. We found in talking to neighbors and pantries that often donated items are not necessarily what our neighbors want or are familiar with. Maybe they will use it if they're just given some guidance. We do try to source as much as possible foods that are culturally familiar or things that are most wanted by our pantry partners and the neighbors they serve. But when we can't do that, we have some other tools that they can use. These include our produce guides, our 7-way cards, our recipe cards, and then a really important thing that we did around food waste was developing a food coding guidance. That's a guide to look beyond the date to waste less food. The other thing that we've been doing at pantries is promoting a choice model, because we've found that if pantries allow neighbors to shop in a way that they would when they're going to the regular grocery store, they'll pick the items that they really want and that they'll use, and it won't go to waste, versus just handing out a bag of food. And it also provides a different level of dignity to that interaction. And for the pantries that have switched to this full choice model, none of them have gone back. All of them have had really positive reviews. And I'm just going to quickly scan through just so you can see what these products look like, and you can access them on your own online. So this is our a sample of our 7 ways guide that shows you different ways to use a product that's often found in the Charitable Food Network. In this case, it's canned tuna. So it gives some simple recipes for folks to use. A produce guide. So if there's an unfamiliar produce item, we have things for beets and all sorts of things that come through our donated stream. This one's on celery, and it talks about how you can even save the little bits that you're not putting peanut butter and raisins on for your kids to use in vegetable stock at a later point in time. It talks about how to store it and really use all of the vegetable. And then we also have our recipe cards, which help to just show how you can make healthy recipes out of the different items that are often in the charitable food streams. Some of these items, all of the cards I've shown you are in English and Spanish, and then we also have been translating into Vietnamese, French, and Arabic, and we'll continue to build out those. So you can find those online. And this is the food coding guide that I mentioned, because often people see that expiration date and they think I have to throw it out, and that's not necessarily the case. So this helps families just, reduce waste at that household level, or even the pantries help reduce waste at the pantry level by knowing how far past the expiration date the food is actually good for. And I think that's over 2 minutes, sorry.
Yes, Jillian, Julius began answering the next question, but it's okay. So calibrate yourself for the next question. But thank you so much. Great information, no problem. Okay, so let's see who would go next.
I can go next.
Yeah, great, Avi. You are in representation on Campus Crew.
Yeah, so sorry Julie couldn't make it, so I'm speaking for her.
We have a great best here, so go, Ivy.
Great. Yeah, I'm Ivy. I'm our composting project coordinator at Compost Crew. We do food scrap composting. We're based in Rockville, but we're doing collections all throughout the DMV. We're servicing over 20,000 customers at this point, which is really exciting. So residential homes, commercial businesses, municipal programs, so on and so forth. We do a lot of hauling, but we've been mostly trying to proliferate decentralized composting through the DMV, and now have 7 compost outposts, is what we call them. And these basically are these models that we work directly with local landowners and local farmers, especially, to compost right on their site, and they get that compost back once it's produced, which is a really cool cycle. Our food scraps, like I said, are directly sourced from our customer base. We also source our browns from local landscapers, so we're trying to keep everything super local, and especially just focusing on local partnerships with public and private entities. And I can go into more of our projects a little later on.
Great. Thank you, Ivy.
Sure.
Okay, so who will go next?
I can go next. My name's Austin Estrell. I'm a senior planner with the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. Our office, which is the Ordinance Administration section, works with the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is essentially the civil law that regulates what can and can't be done on certain properties based on the zoning district in which they're located. The ordinance sets forth kind of regulations of these zoning districts, and for someone who wants to come in and maybe establish a use, so let that be a business, let it be a restaurant, let it be someone who is trying to open a food bank, or someone who's trying to even do something as simple as open a community garden or create a community garden. We're the group that ends up writing those regulations and then interpreting the zoning ordinance, and then also working with the developer or in person who is trying to open one of these businesses to determine how and where that can be done.
Excellent. Thank you, Austin. And how will go next, Sean?
Hey everyone, my name is Sean Sacco. I'm the Executive Director for Food Nutrition Services with Fairfax County Public Schools. Food Nutrition Services has a whole bunch of different programs, most notably our school breakfast program as well as our school lunch program. We also offer after-school meals, so we call that the supper program too, at our schools that are Title I, but also have some sort of enrichment program after school lets out. In addition to that too, we also have, I believe it was over 100 summer food sites last school year too, or last summer, in which we offer free meals to any student or any child that's 18 and under. Beyond that, I am about a year and some change new into this position. We're really trying to make sure that we focus on student voice into our school meals. So that way our students are telling us what they want to eat instead of us telling our students what they want to eat, as well as we have a lot of sustainability initiatives that I'm sure is going to come up for questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we have gone to the first round. So now it comes the second question, and still the same time rule applies. What are some of your organization's ongoing and upcoming initiatives relating to food waste reduction, food rescue, and composting? And as before, just feel free to interject, one at a time.
I can go first. So as far as food nutrition goes, we're doing it in a multi-pronged approach. So when it comes to prevention of food waste, we want to make sure that we're engaging our students to see what foods do they want to eat. We have our own nutrition standards that we've already set. So for example, all of our grains are whole grain or whole grain rich. We make sure that we eliminate all artificial colors and flavors and sweeteners from all of our foods. So we have a team of 6 dietitians on staff that already ensures that our nutritional standards are being met. Beyond that, we try to make sure that we can engage our students to make sure that their voice is really impacted and elevated into our school food, so that we're feeding our students and not feeding our trash cans. So that's one way that we try to make sure that we prevent against food waste, is feeding our kids instead of feeding the trash can in a general sense. Another way is we make sure that we instruct our students to try to select what they want and eat what they select kind of model too. So starting at the beginning of last school year, we initiated salad bars to all of our students, which is a really great way for us to expose and to encourage students to select unlimited fruits and vegetables, which is fantastic. But we want to make sure that, as they're selecting all of these fruits and vegetables, that they're actually consuming them. Because what we do is we utilize forecasting. So if we know that we prepared, 2 hotel pans of apple slices today, and only 1 hotel pan was taken, then we'll reduce our amount of apple slices that we prepare ahead of time to try to make sure that we're not having too much food waste too. Another initiative that we've made sure that we've been able to accomplish is we're increasing our use and availability of our share tables. And so we've provided guidance with the schools to make sure that, if a student does select, say, for example, a banana from the salad bar and decides that that was a little bit too much that they wanted, they can put it onto a share table, and that's something that any other student can walk up, pick up that banana if they feel like they're hungry, if they want an additional snack for later too. Beyond that too, I don't know if we're going to go into any other sustainability, but those are the few ways that we're trying to make sure that we're approaching reduction of food waste as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Next.
I can speak. I think everything about Food Rescue USDC is to avoid food waste. So that is where we begin. I mean, I think some things that I think we have a very deep partnership with many different agencies in DC and Northern Virginia to kind of make sure that we're hearing about places that need food, places that want to donate food. I love it when we do something called Rescuing the Rescue, when a business, when a agency partner might get more food than they can even use. And instead of, and they're able to work with our network to make sure that they reach out and potentially place it with another food.
It is me or it is Kate? It is frozen.
Yeah, it looks like she's frozen, Joe.
Yeah.
Am I frozen? Oh, goodness.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
Oh,
something
yeah.
happened. Yeah, you were talking about the rescue and the rescue. when
Rescuing
you
the
use
rescue, yes, which is a pretty basic thing, but I think we don't always think about it. Another thing is my hope to work more deeply with composters, because we know that there is sometimes food that is offered for donation that really should be composted. And so also before composters go in, to be able to have an opportunity to rescue the food that is edible. So here in the district, we're working with the Department of Public Works and the Department of Energy and the Environment to make that balance, knowing when it's really time for composting to come in or when we should wait until we do rescue first. So these are just some quick techniques. I want to keep it short, but I think, you know, the basic work we do is pick up and drop off of food, but sometimes you get very creative about how to go the extra mile. And like when a truckload of tomatoes are coming in, you need to know that not everything's going to be salvageable. So you have to kind of have that in the back of your mind, what to do with that can't be used.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Who goes next?
I can go next, Joe.
Great, Amanda.
So in my role at Lawn to Table, you know, part of what we're doing is educating folks on how to grow their own food, but then how to develop their own compost in their backyard. So at private residences, that's a piece of it. Speaking from the restaurant angle, you know, at Compass Rose, one of my roles is primarily to help us manage food waste reduction by carefully managing our inventory. We're working well with sort of a set of dedicated clients and suppliers that's helping us reduce our likelihood of things going to waste, product not being what we want it to be, and making sure we're really communicating that with our suppliers. And then as a restaurant that really encourages an abundance of food, a huge piece of this is encouraging folks to take food home with them, right? If you go to a restaurant, that food's, if you don't eat it, what's on your plate, it's being thrown out, unfortunately. And so that's a huge piece of the restaurant industry, of food waste reduction. Previously at my time at Field & Main, you know, one of the primary things we focused on was elevating, you know, local suppliers and getting the vast bulk of our food from local suppliers. With this, we're, you know, reducing our food supply chain, reducing food miles, and then just ensuring fresher food and less spoilage overall. And then at Maidon, we actually did work with Food Rescue to allow us to, you know, get rid of that excess food that we had. And so all of that, I think there's sort of these different silos, right? And I think in the next question, Joe, I'll probably touch on training of staff and sort of the challenges that come with that as well. But, you know, there's sort of these silos of how are we managing our inventory? What are we doing in the prep process when we have too much food? And then, you know, after food is created, there's some pretty severe regulatory issues that come with getting rid of prepped food. But those are sort of three distinct silos in which there's opportunity for food waste reduction in the restaurant industry.
Great, Amanda. Thank you. Who next?
I'll go next. So within the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development, the zoning ordinance establishes, like I talked about, what can and can't be done on properties within the county. And it's the entirety of the county, let it be residential areas, commercial areas, common space, industrial areas. And so something I think our group has tried to be more proactive with in recent years is really understanding that our zoning ordinance is a living and breathing document. It's a document that is attempts to regulate not only existing uses, but future uses. And so we've been attempting to work with with members of the community to try to better understand when proposals come up of what they're most similar to, and really working with an educational perspective of how can we kind of tailor some of these uses, when we consider businesses and anything like that a use, towards certain districts. So if you are proposing or have an idea of opening some sort of, let's just say, a food waste reduction group, a site or anything like that, we offer pretty much 8 to 4 every single day, a planner who you could speak to, who can kind of guide you towards the areas you would be permitted to do this in, what would be considered, and also processes that are free processes to request interpretations of the zoning ordinance to determine before you sign a contract that, hey, I'm going to lease this land or I'm going to buy this property. We offer these interpretations to determine what your use is, how it's permitted, any constraints you may have on that use, and then further what the permitting process, or if there's a permitting process associated with what you're doing.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Next.
I can go. Some recent updates. We recently merged with Key City Compost, which is based in Frederick, Maryland. So we have now taken on their composting site, which is now our largest composting site. So we're learning how to kind of take our mid-scale model and kind of upgrade it. But this outpost is processing over 36,000 pounds of food scraps every week. So now we're diverting over 300 million pounds of food scraps every year, which is really exciting. We're working on some really great partnerships. We're servicing DC, over 9,000 customers throughout DC as residential customers. And as a part of that, that's our biggest municipal program we've ever had. So we're also providing finished compost back to those residents so they can learn about the great benefits of compost, not just diverting your food scraps, but what finished compost can actually do as well. And so in that, we just launched our Farm Feast compost product, which is our first time registering our finished compost. We want to proliferate using compost to amend the soil with. And I'm glad, Amanda, you brought up training. We're also working a lot with training our customers, especially commercial customers, with empowering them how to compost correctly, because that's definitely a big topic on contamination. We want to make sure we're creating high quality compost that's actually beneficial when it's amended to the soil and not contaminating our soil. So big education platform as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jillian, do you want to go?
I think I already took up my time on this question, so I'll wait for the next one. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question is, are there any policy or regulatory issues that prevent your organization from addressing food waste reduction, food rescue, and or composting?
Can go. There's no regulatory issues. I would say the most challenging thing when it comes to school settings as well as school composting is the infrastructure. We can create a system where we have the composting. However, it's the how do we transport that to an industrial compost? How do we get that picked up and then brought over to someone that can compost it? It's that infrastructure that's not there yet for such a, we have over 200 school sites, and some of this is post-consumer waste rather than pre-consumer waste. Pre-consumer waste, we can make sure that we prevent against that. It's the post-consumer waste where it's now you're having, if it's a salad, it might be mixed with ranch dressing and cheese. And so having those two items mixed together impacts the way that that food would now be composted too. So it's building out the infrastructure for that post-consumer waste is the most challenging aspect when it comes to composting in school food.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback off of that is our major issue as well. So there's definitely huge regulatory barriers to decentralized, small to medium scale composting for post-consumer food scraps. Food scraps are kind of classified as a solid waste. So it's treated the same as, a wastewater facility or a transfer station. So it's really hard to get smaller scale composting other than, these big industrial composting sites. In Maryland, we can go and take a compost facility operator's exam to get certified as an operator for free. In Virginia, it's something you'd have to go through certification for solid waste management, which is a huge thing to be trained on. So we have really two main options. We can do a 100 cubic yard educational site. This is really restrictive. I mean, even our smallest sites are processing on average 200 cubic yards. These are, our compost outposts, which are pretty small sites. And most of that material is carbon storage. It's our cure piles. So it's really not even the food scraps. So that's very restrictive. Or we could do a permit by rule. But this is also very restrictive. It's very expensive. It's, I think about $3,000 just to, go through the permitting process, over 5 months of permitting. And again, the composter is required to be a licensed solid waste facility operator. So definitely limiting decentralized composting. But decentralized composting is kind of what our goal is, because it's reducing distance traveled to composting facilities. It's making it easier for local schools to have access to, composting. And, on just a 5,000 square foot area, we can process 700 to 800 households of food scraps. So if we can strategically place these around Virginia, we can increase access. So we also want to keep, nutrients local for local farmers. It's what we consider the best option. So regulatory barriers is definitely what we're running into with proliferating this.
Excellent. Thank you. Great points there already. Who wants to go next?
I
Gina?
can go next. I would say for the food bank, one of the challenges is obviously, unlike Compass Rose, we do hope to have some say in our inventory, but often we just have to look at sort of those donations that come in. Often produce that's donated, it's such a wonderful gift, but it often at the end of its shelf life, as you may imagine. So trying to move that as quickly as possible and get it to the consumer while it's still usable. And just because we do, we're dealing in millions of pounds, it's really a lot of food that comes in and out of our warehouse, which in some ways means that we can have a greater impact if we handle the waste in an appropriate way. But it also means that the cost involved and the space that would be needed to do that, nearby is definitely challenging, especially as our budget becomes tighter and tighter, and the need for our food insecure population is higher and higher these days. So we're grappling with that. We're trying different things, but it's definitely challenging, I would say, as you may imagine. So any ideas folks have as far as supporting that, sort of from the financial side, that would be great.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Kate.
One policy that would, I think, help us all is if there was more clarity about date labeling, because we definitely have some agencies that are rather, I wouldn't say loose, but they're, I think, really educated about the fact that sometimes if a label for individually packaged food, it has 3 days after the date, that it can still be consumed. Some agencies are very, very stern, and we respect that, of course, if they say we can't take anything at date or close to date. Others are more liberal. So the general confusion about what it really means is, causes us to hiccup and try to figure out, well, if they won't take it, who else could take it? Because we know that it's still good, but we still want to respect the fact that different agencies have different policies.
Great point.
So I'll go next. And policy and regulation is what my organization within Ordinance Administration works specifically with. And we work with implementation of the ordinance. And we also work with amending the ordinance, so changing laws. And I think an issue that we run into is a lot of times we're reactive to situations. There are things where there's cases where at no one's fault, people we might get involved in the situation later than we would like. So in cases where someone already owns a property, or cases where someone has already leased a property and has found out that, hey, I can't do what I want to do on this property because of the regulations that are currently there. So something we're continuously trying to implement and educate regarding is getting involved earlier, getting involved kind of in that the due diligence period of trying to find properties and determining what a use is considered and where it can go and what kind of regulations they may be running into. And then I would also say that, some of the issues that we deal with are that when we go to change law, so we find a case where something isn't permitted and we feel that, really should be permitted. We are kind of bound by the Board of Supervisors. We're bound by what the ordinance allows us to do, and then a process that then is fairly long to get the zoning ordinance amended, minimum generally 6 months to a year. And so I think what we're trying to work with is being more forward thinking about uses, forward thinking about land development, and attempting to be more flexible with our regulations to allow for uses to be implemented without having to maybe amend the ordinance, but also amending the ordinance, thinking about those future land uses and being more proactive instead of reactive.
Excellent. Thank you.
Within the restaurant industry, one of the biggest regulatory issues regarding reusing food and food rescue is the inability to donate prepared or cooked food. This obviously is there. It's important for public health overall. There's a lot of liability concerns, especially around, things like foodborne illnesses. But obviously these rules also prevent restaurants from giving away food that is safe and nutritious to eat. There are companies that are sort of dealing with this in terms of selling at a lower price. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the app Too Good To Go, but there's this idea of there's an opportunity to resell that food at a lower rate. But I would say that that's one of the major regulatory issues regarding reusing food within the restaurant industry. But besides regulatory issues, one of our biggest challenges really lie in training and cultural norms. Ivy touched base on this as well regarding composting, but, running a restaurant, a huge bulk of your time is dedicated to staff hiring and training and development. Adding on one more thing in terms of making sure that we're staying on top of composting and making sure the staff is sufficiently trained there can be a big challenge. And having organizations that are willing to come in and educate the staff there is extremely helpful. And then the other piece of this is just preparing the food, right? Traditionally, chefs have sort of prioritized presentation, prime cuts. There's an association with certain cuts that are just sort of traditional in fine dining generally. And it's really key to have a shift in mindset of restaurant owners and chefs in terms of the preparation of ingredients, how you're using those ingredients and where you're sourcing them from. One of the best examples of this I've seen ever is Blue Hill at Stone Barns in New York. And they're sourcing 80% of their ingredients from the farm that's on site. And they're using all parts of the cow when they're butchering it, right? And obviously that's the extreme, but the more that we can shift towards that and shift towards the education of chefs and people in the industry in terms of what it looks like to use all parts of the animal, what it looks like to use different parts of vegetables and things like that, the more we shift to a whole ingredient approach, the more we're going to be able to reduce food waste in the long run. So I think the huge piece of this is training and also cultural norms in terms of just using an excess of food.
Great. Thank you. Lots of food for thought, people, for the next session. This is wonderful. Now, the last question for you in the panel, it is, you have identified many different elements, many different pieces, make references to the support from others and whatnot. This is your opportunity to share with us how can others get involved in your area? What are these others that could become potentially good partners for you continue in your crusade to do better handling of food?
Go first. So food nutrition services is really meant here to feed our students. So our students are able to focus on their academics and not focus on their empty stomachs. My biggest driving force is to make sure that we can feed every single student a good solid meal, especially for those students who need it the most. So I'm talking about the students who would be qualifying for free and reduced meals or attend a school that would be considered Title I or a CEP school. I think we have a lot of barriers when it comes to feeding our students. I was just looking at numbers, and while our participation and our meal served has increased in the past 2 years, it's still not where we need to be, where it's some of our schools are completely free for their meals, but only about 20% will pick up a breakfast for the day. We're looking at making sure that we can still, as I'm looking at like high school start times, it is very early and it's hard for high schoolers to start their day that early. But I also know that high schoolers are the ones that are most prone to um, um, what's the terminology I'm looking for? Disordered eating. So it's something that it's painful for me to see such a low participation for high school students, while also knowing that that's when their brain's still forming. That's when their academics is at the highest, and that's when they need the food the most. So I guess my biggest advocacy for you all is to make sure that you're trying to normalize school food and normalizing participation in school food. I think that there's a really big negative perception when it comes to school food, and a really big otherism when it comes to school food. So, in your advocacy work, in your discussions, even with your own students, just try to normalize that participation in school food, and elevating the work that we're currently doing to make sure that we are improving what that perception is, as well as improving the acceptance rate for our students too. But preventing against, again, we're feeding our students and not feeding our trash cans, would be the best work for you all to advocate on our end.
Excellent point. Who next?
Happy to speak. How we can get others involved. So welcoming volunteers all the time. That is, the more volunteers we have, the more likely we can say yes to even the smallest donation. We like to say, meals for 20 or so that we'll be able to rescue. We've also instituted bike rescues, which is kind of fun. And, talk about reducing a carbon footprint when we've got people in the district, not yet in Northern Virginia. I have to kind of make sure I find reasonable bike routes in Northern Virginia, but in DC, we do a lot of that. It's letting businesses know that they can safely donate food because of the Bill Emerson Law and the Food Donation Improvement Act. And we actually do a lot of prepared food rescue from corporate cafeterias all around, especially in Northern Virginia. We have many, many accounts with very kind of seasoned chefs from these cafeterias who, with great care, do donate their prepared food. So it's awareness about the fact that food donation is safe under the proper circumstances. We need places to take the food. So it just, it's always a dilemma. If we get a large donation, we know that we need to safely be able to transport that within 15, 20 minutes to a place that can use that exact type of food. So it's always a match game. So we're always kind of juggling all these three pillars to make sure that we're making the right decisions. And, as I mentioned prior, I really do want to figure out how more deeply to work with composters, because I think that is so important that we kind of compare notes and share ideas about how we can together do the very best we can to reduce food waste.
Great, thank you.
I can go next. So, how others can get involved in our work when it comes to the Fairfax County zoning ordinance and the administration of the zoning ordinance is our zoning ordinance is approved via public processes. It's amended via public processes. And so we encourage people to get involved in public hearings. We encourage groups, advocacy groups, residents, whoever you are, to get involved from a community level to let us know the changes that you want to see. We are public servants and we are reactive to the needs of the community. And so what I encourage people to do is to take the time to speak to elected representatives, take the time to send an email to those representatives representatives and express concerns or frustrations you may have, or some things that you're working on and you'd like to see, let's just say, changes in regulations, related to a certain use or related to kind of an area of interest. And so as such, something we try to do is be really proactive about, publicly sharing when we have amendments, when we have these open houses, things like that. But I think getting communities involved and getting industry involved earlier in the process to let us know the regulatory flexibility that they'd like to see is extremely important, and is something that I think more people should get involved in.
Right.
I can go next. Kind of building along what Kate was saying, just for us really trying to build composting in as a best practice among our pantry partners, and at the food bank as well. But once again, I think we stand in a position of being a convener of about 400 community-based organizations across the DMV, all of them dealing with food. And so if there are ways for any of our composting partners to provide guidance on best practices, how to get connected with you all, and potentially, I'm not sure if you have any programs specifically for 501c3s, but often the pantries we're dealing with have little to no budget. Some have large budgets, and that's a different story. But even if there was some sort of way of kind of tiers of payment for different organizations so that they could at least test it out and get used to it and start getting in the habit of composting anything that is wasted at their site. I think that would be a great first step for collaboration.
Okay.
I think on my front, everything I just mentioned about the chefs is applicable to us all as well, right? I would encourage just learn for yourself how to cook with different ingredients, learn how to use all parts of the animal, all the vegetables, learn to use every piece of it and normalize that within your families and how your families approach it. The second thing I'll say is just take your food home with you. When you order food, take home your leftovers and use them, or find creative ways to reuse them. I think little by little, each one of us individually can begin to shift the culture generally from a culture of waste to a culture of personal responsibility. And I think that cultural shift is really what's necessary here.
Great. Thank you.
From my point of view, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No. I was saying that now it's Nia's storm. Sorry.
Okay. From my point of view, again, educating on the hierarchy of food recovery is really important. Unfortunately, we love to make compost, but we do not like to see such edible food going to waste and being composted. So obviously there's amazing organizations that this food can go to before it gets to us. So we definitely encourage reaching out to those organizations first. And then on the other end, advocating to change regulations to allow for more composting so that when those food recovery systems can't use them, they can come to us. So we love the idea of the educational composting site. We'd love to increase the capacity for that because we love to give tours. We love to educate on composting. So if we could just increase the capacity for those sites, that means more decentralized composting, more food waste solutions, more nutrient availability for local producers, and more green jobs, which we always love to see.
Ivy, can I ask a quick question following?
Sure.
Follow-up? When you notice that you are receiving things in the compost that look like they probably could have been consumed, is there any education component or outreach back to those sources, or it's too hard to do that? Because I'm just thinking, that may be an area where we could have really targeted outreach on education of making sure that those items are first and foremost consumed when possible and then composted.
Yeah, so it's difficult to reach out directly to the source because we get a route of over 300 stops. But we do social media marketing, and we do newsletters where we're trying to advocate for different ways to use food before it goes bad. But yeah, the goal is to have more education. So a lot of our education right now is on contamination, but encouraging more of how to use food waste before it actually becomes waste is something that we would like to focus on.
Thanks.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. We finished the round of panelists where I do the asking. Now we have a few minutes for you, the audience, to raise your hand and see whether we can squeeze a couple of questions before we move to the next part of the program. So the floor is yours. I want to see hands being raised for questions to the panelists. People, don't be shy. There is lots of food for thought. Yes, Catherine, please go for it.
Good morning. I am Kate Salerno, and I am the Zero Waste Manager for Fairfax County Public Schools. I'm new in this position, but not new to Fairfax County Public Schools. And funny enough, Ivy, I just emailed your company this morning around 7 a.m. referencing the contract that exists in the school system and the county to see if there is any bandwidth on your side to look at a pilot for a couple of our schools. Would you have the ability to do some pickups at some of our schools from cafeteria waste? If there's one question I get over and over again, and I got it again this morning from my supervisor, is a composting pilot from cafeteria waste. So I don't know whether you have the bandwidth to support that level and that quantity of waste, as Sean was mentioning earlier, and my colleague Ali is on here too, but very curious.
Yeah, I know we service schools for this exact idea, so I know that we have the capacity to do that. I personally work on the composting side, so I'm not so much in the collection side, but I can make sure that your question is answered.
Thanks. We're interested. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Wow, these things are happening as we speak. This was the idea of having it, and we are making these connections already. How wonderful. Is there any other question that it is really burning that you want to get our panelists into?
Looks like Juan Pablo.
Yeah, I could not find the button to raise your hand. I don't know where it's gone. This is for Fairfax schools, maybe Sean. But I recently emailed someone from FNS. Before the pandemic, we had a program from Arcadia Farms where we would supply an ingredient to some of the schools that we'd been working with. The first one, this is, I think, like my 4th day on the job, but it was radishes, and we would supply for the salad bar the radishes. I would go in the day the radishes showed up on the salad bar and do taste tests with the kids, and I would walk around to whatever 600 students during lunchtime and just like encourage them to try them. And then we would always like take notes about like how many kids said they liked them versus said they didn't like them. And then those radishes would show up on their salad bar for the next like 2 weeks or something. And I remember going back to the school and speaking to the cafeteria staff and them being like, this is crazy. Like the kids are eating the radishes. Like they've, like we have to actually fill up the thing, one time during lunch hour, which we never have to do for any of the ingredients in the salad bar. And we thought it was a really effective program. It really like identified with a lot of the stuff we were trying to do with schools. Usually we would target schools that had already been out to a field trip, schools that we had been working with in their school garden. Obviously the pandemic ended that program, and we've been through big changes at our farm, and so we haven't had the capacity to like reach out again. But I reached out again with the hopes that maybe a year from now, so the fall of 2025, we could try to see if we can start doing a program like that. But my point being that like just serving the ingredient, it's hard to get kids to just like try it out. Anyone who's a parent know that that's just not how it works. But like, you know, I thought I was very good at the part of just like being kind of, you know, goofy and fun with vegetables and like trying to get kids to eat them. And we would get like 95% of the students to like try the vegetable. And then, you know, pretty high percentages of kids who were like, all right, I'm going to eat this on a regular basis. And so uh, you don't have to consider us, but I think including some sort of like programming around, you know, actually getting them to try it, because I think that's the hardest part. It's like a lot of them will like it, but they just have the mindset of like, I don't eat this particular thing. I emailed.
So really great points. I just want to touch on a few of them. So one, I just sent you a chat. Lindsay Capo, she is our farm to school coordinator. She currently deals with 4P Foods, which is a local Virginia-owned small and medium chain farm distributor. And so we mostly partner with them to make sure that we can get availability of foods. But if you want to connect with her, we can make sure that we are able to connect with your farm as well. We're also going to be attending, I think, next week, a farm to school conference held in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So that way we can connect with more local Virginia farms. You know, this doesn't really have to do with composting, but we know that when we're purchasing more and more local products, we're still impacting or having less and less impact onto our environment, as well as we're able to invest into our local community instead of investing out in California or investing out in Arizona or something like that too. So we're able to keep those dollars local rather than sending them out. To your second point, sampling is so critical. And I absolutely love the fact that, and again, with me being new to the role, I know that I don't have the historical context of what might have been done prior to me being on board. But sampling is so important. Just as a little tidbit, we launched recently chana masala and chicken tikka masala at our schools, which is really impactful when it comes to making sure our Indian population feels connected to their schools and being represented in their school food. However, we also got feedback from some of our elementary school cafeteria staff saying that a lot of schools were, or a lot of students were afraid to. So we recognize that we need to do, and it's not just vegetables, it's all kinds of foods that we need to make sure that we're sampling just to engage our students, and as well as broaden their knowledge and taste and exposure to new foods. I absolutely love the idea of doing nutrition education and connecting our farmers with our students. We also have a program called a Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, which sounds like it would be perfect for you because that program is in Title I schools. It's about 10 of our elementary schools right now, so it's a smaller percentage of our schools. And so it would be easier to impact those, as well as there's a nutrition ed component to it too. Again, I sent you Lindsay's contact information. If you want to shoot her an email, you can also CC me as well. But she would be the best person for that connection. But again, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Connections being made in action. This is so incredibly wonderful. We are running out of time for the next session, but I want to honor one last question. Very short question, very short answer. We can move to the next level. You are going to have time to speak and to comment on the different issues that you have later on, so please don't despair yet. So Caroline, why don't you go ahead and, pose your question? Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't know how short it is, but my name is Caroline Hockenberry. I am the Farmers Market Coordinator for the 10 Fairfax County Park Authority markets in our county. And one of the things that we do find with our farmers is they do have a lot of excess. It's on their farms typically at the end of the week. And one of the questions that we've had from farmers is the liability issue. And I wanted to address this to Amanda. There is a federal act, the bill, hold on a second, I had pulled it up. It's called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. Are you familiar with that? So it is a federal act, and there apparently is a similar Virginia law that says that people can't be held liable, restaurants, grocery stores, farmers, for donating their food in good, in good condition to any kind of food pantry or distribution. And I just wondered, and maybe this is to the county person, is there something specifically in Fairfax County that doesn't allow restaurants to donate? I know when I was in the community centers, we would get certain restaurants and things that had gone through some sort of it was called Food Connections or something, and they would be able to donate, and you could go to them and say, hey, we need food at our community center, and they would do it. But I didn't know if there was something overarching in Fairfax County that keeps restaurants and stores from just opening their doors and saying, hey, we have food for you, and working through Food Rescue or some of these other agencies.
Yeah, so my restaurants are specifically in the district, so I
Okay.
can't necessarily speak to Virginia policies on that.
Mhm.
Not to put Kate on the spot, but I did see you nodding, so I didn't know if you had a response here.
You know, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act of 1996 is something that we quote a lot, which is a federal law that was actually kind of enhanced in 2023 by the Food Donation Improvement Act. So there's a lot of, I mean, when I approach a potential donor, if they give any hesitation about the liability, I start to, you know, describe these two federal laws. Most times they become comfortable with donation once they hear about that. I mean, there are, you know, traditionally it would be businesses donating to nonprofit agencies. I think that we, especially during COVID, mutual aids became a critically important part of how we would do food rescue because they knew their neighborhoods, they knew who was food insecure. But I think that, you know, we are able to get most people to yes when we discuss those liability protections. And I do, because we work in DC, Maryland, Virginia, sometimes I do feel a little bit like, you know, once in Arlington County, we got into a little situation with the health department because we were a third party engaging in food donations. So sometimes you think you got the big umbrella laws and then
Right.
something can come underneath and kind of complicate things. But I will just say that we do a lot of rescue from fresh farm markets for them. So I'd love to be in touch with you to make sure all your farmers markets are being gleaned. But I don't feel that it's a huge obstacle lately to getting places to say yes. And again, as I mentioned, we do have a lot of corporate cafeterias that, you know, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Boeing, these are places that are comfortable donating. And we, you know, I said earlier, we try to make our distance between pickup and drop off quick, 15 minutes or so. And so I just kind of keep going with that. And until we get, you know, if people are absolutely convinced that they don't want to participate in food donations, sometimes you just need to move on because there's so much food out there. So there's other places to go to. But I do think it's good that we all talk about the Bill Emerson Act and use it to get people to say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm so sorry to have to cut this part of the conversation. This is getting very active and motivational, but we are moving to the next breakout sessions, which are spaces for you to continue this conversation. We are going to have 3 breakout rooms. We are going to have a facilitator on each one of them. So you are welcome to consider where to join. One would be food waste reduction. Amanda Tyndall will be your facilitator. A second group will be composting. Cassandra Lawson will be facilitating for you. And food rescue, where Alisa Brooks will be doing the facilitating. So you, assuming you are going to see popping up on your screens the break room that you want to move on, and you know the capable people handling this whole exercise will be able to guide you in case that you have any need. And talk about great, everybody's back. So short time, but profound and in-depth conversation. This is great because it gives us the impetus to continue this activity, you know, going forward. So I'd like to ask to each one of the facilitators to please share the highlights of the conversation. If it is okay, I would like to ask Amanda to start sharing with us about the food waste reduction, please.
Sure. So, obviously food waste reduction is at the front end, and we had a number of folks who were, in education or in sort of preschool programs or community development, right, or community programs. And really the key piece that we came away from was just education, right? Encouraging folks to try the vegetable, kind of like Juan Pablo was mentioning, with the radishes. Jillian was just sharing about, urban garden demonstrations and encouraging, kids' interaction with a vegetable for the first time and creating those opportunities for folks to engage with the food. The other piece that we talked about is just, preparation methods. And people are going to only eat food if it tastes good. So what does it look like for us to educate folks on how to prepare that food well, so that it's both simultaneously delicious and is actually healthy for you and nutritious. And then the other piece we talked about was just, the ability, we both want to help people be able to stretch their dollar by stretching the food, but then also a lot of folks are extremely limited in terms of time. So what does it look like for us to educate the community and educate the people we interact with on how to, stretch the dollar, stretch the food, but then also recognize that time is limited, and encouraging preparation methods and approaches that allow us to work within sort of constrained time. So that was the short of our conversation.
Excellent, great points, great summaries. Thank you. Now, I would like to ask Cassandra to please share with us about the composting conversation.
Yes. So I think the main barrier, Ivy was in our group from Compost Crew, and they need basically more space allowed to operate at a larger scale. And they're also working on how to safely provide education at their educational site at the 66 transfer station. And so Austin gave some advice on how to engage the county on possibly getting, more opportunities for people to come to their site and get educated about how compost is made. And then Austin was telling us before we came back about how composting at home is permitted as an accessory use for homeowners to be able to compost at their homes.
Great, thank you. And finally, Alyssa, please, on the food rescue conversation, would you mind sharing with us?
Yeah, sure. We had a great conversation. We could have talked for a lot longer. So we were talking about that there's no current policies for food rescue, people that work in food rescue, if they come to the farmers markets to pick up produce. So there's been situations where maybe they haven't brought their own containers, and then they were scrambling to try to get bags and stuff. We also talked about that there are these big food pits at farms. So whatever's not sold at the farmers markets, the farmers have to bring back and just throw it in a pit, but it's perfectly good food because of the farmers' kind of turnaround time with farmers markets and harvesting and everything. This perfectly good food just goes in these pits. So we were talking about could there be some county either volunteers or someone that could go to these farms and kind of do a round to gather all the food instead of it all ending up in these pits.
Wonderful. This is, as you can tell, a very rich conversation, a very effective summary. I wonder whether there are a couple of comments that people may want to include as part of the conversation that want to highlight. I think that we have a couple of minutes that we could probably open it up for people further enhancing the summaries. The floor is open. Any question or let's say that the people who did the summary really captured effectively the points. I think that is an indication from the earlier conversation that, there is a lot of appetite to continue this kind of conversation. So we will see here in the group, on the possibilities of how can we continue effectively and advance this conversation. Are
That's
you
what
like to?
Yeah, Joe, that's what I was going to pick up on is I think it's, where do we take this in each of these areas? There's, I think, some really good discussions and thinking and really opportunity for a number of action steps. So I know that Alyssa has recorded this session and we are going to, we'll put together the notes and sort of what we heard as action steps and share it with folks, and then maybe through our 2 work groups we can figure out how to move some of these specific issues forward and get people that are as mostly interested who are here to join us and try to get involved.
Yeah, we definitely are going to go dig in because so many important things were said, so many initiatives and possibilities that we could we help implementing and advance. We will share the notes, and if I may offer that, Diane, if you have reactions from these notes to continue and carrying this conversation and sort of start shaping certain elements and whatnot. So of course, don't feel shy to make your own connection, because I see that there are always areas of interest and interlacing and synergies to continue advancing on this initiative. So I think that this is incredibly exciting, and we feel incredibly validated on the benefit of having this workshop, this work group, because it really highlights the need for this and how we need to work together at different levels to be able to address and advance this. So if there are no questions and comments, I would like to invite you to take note of the upcoming meetings that we are having. The next Urban Act meeting is going to be on November 18 and 10 o'clock, between 10 and 11. The next Policy Task Force will be taking place on November 19, also from 10 to 11. And the Food Access and Literature Group will be in November 20th. Be on the lookout for the newsletter that is going to have the link for this conversation. And please feel free to address and help us collectively shape this initiative. Thanks very much for your participation, particularly to the panelists. You really inspire the dynamics of the conversation. So thanks again, and until next time, have a good day now. Bye-bye.